Hey guitar students, this is the beginning of Unit 5. You've made it to Tablature and Advanced Guitar Techniques. The first part of this unit is going to be focused on reading tablature. And tablature is an alternative notation system that's used really commonly by a lot of guitar players. I don't think that it replaces reading music, which is, notes and rhythms on a staff. But for reading and writing melodies, it can be quite useful, especially in our kind of computer and technology day and age, because it makes it really easy for guitar players to share music and melodies online. It's hundreds and hundreds of years old, actually, the system of tablature. Back when there used to be like lute players in the Renaissance before music notation was as standardized. And then it disappeared for a very long time, but it's come back recently because it's very easy for guitar players and banjo, mandolin, other string instrument players to type melodies on the computer and really easily share them online. And so that's why it's become a really useful and important tool more recently. To have a music notation program on the computer is kind of expensive and they can be hard to use, but using the system of tab, anyone can just open like a Word document or a Google Doc, and using numbers and using the slash button, you can kind of create melodies that way. And if you use Ultimate Guitar ever to search for your favorite songs, you'll have seen tablature, and this will help you a lot. It's used very frequently for instrumental introductions, for kind of pretty instrumental interludes, and then just writing out short melodies that you might want to play. So tab is not as commonly used for chords. It can be, but it's mostly used for short melodies. The way it works is this. Instead of reading 5 lines on a staff, which is what we normally do, like when we read music on the board or for band or strings or choir, tablature uses 6 lines. And the reason they use 6 lines is because each line represents a string of your guitar. The top line represents your high E, so the very highest sounding string sits on top. And then it just follows from there. B, G, D, A, and then low E sits on the very bottom of your tab diagram. This can be a little confusing because you read the high E on the top, but when you're playing your guitar, your high E sits closer to the floor. So what you need to remember is that because E has the highest sound, E sits on the top of the tab diagram. Okay, it doesn't have to do with the position of the way you hold your guitar, but it has to do with the sounds that you hear. Okay. In addition to those 6 lines that represent the strings, you also have numbers. So usually there are not rhythms. Usually there are not extra information like dynamics or slurs or ties, anything like that. Usually you'll just see numbers like this, and the number is written on the line with the line cutting right through it. And what that number represents is the fret that needs to be pressed down, okay, in order reading from left to right. So I have a melody written here. This will be a familiar melody to you. It starts off with a 0, and 0 means open. So you're going to start off by playing this melody, open E string 2 times. Next we have a number 1. So number 1 means that I need to press down my first fret when I play the E string. So the song starts out with 0, 0, 1. From there, it continues. I keep playing on the first string for a while. 0, 0, 1, 3, 3, 1, 0. So let me try that, all on my first string. This might be sounding familiar to you, but let's keep going. I've gotten to the end of this little section, and you can see now that the numbers jump down to the second string. Okay, they're written on the second line. So that means I'm going to switch where I'm playing. I'm going to switch to the second string, and I'm going to play with fingers on 3rd fret, 1st fret, 1st fret, 3rd fret. From there I go back to the 1st string for 2 open notes, and back to the 2nd string for 2 notes with the 3rd fret pressed down. If I put the whole thing together, it sounds like and if you remember back to some of our earlier units, that's the melody from Ode to Joy. And it's just written a different way. So instead of having to struggle through identifying notes on lines or spaces and reading rhythms, you just have a very rough sketch of where you put your fingers to play the melody. Okay? When you play tab, typically it only really works when you know what the song is supposed to sound like. Okay? So this is something that you've heard on the radio, that you know how to sing, you already know how the melody goes, and you just need to know where to put your fingers, and then you're going to be able to play it. It doesn't work for learning, or it doesn't work very well, I should say, for learning a brand new song that you've never heard, because you'll see we don't have rhythms written in. We don't know if this is a half note, if it's a whole note, if these are eighth notes. We don't know if it's fast or slow, and so it's hard to tell if you don't know how the melody's supposed to sound. You know, so that it's important that you know how it sounds, and you just need to know where your fingers go. Okay, but that's how tab can be really helpful when, again, you know how it's supposed to sound. That's your basic intro. Once you get started, I think that you'll find you pick tab up pretty quickly. I don't think that tab replaces reading music notation as a guitar player, but I think it is important that you know both, especially if you're going to be using a computer to find songs that you want to learn how to play. It also can be really helpful if you just want to write something down super quickly and you just want to sketch down fret numbers. Your next steps here for this unit, you're going to read a little bit in your book on page 70. Just read this introduction to tab. They have another diagram here to kind of show you what the relationship is between tablature and reading notes on the staff. And then your next step is going to be to practice and quiz the short tab melody at the bottom of the page. They've written the melody 2 ways. They wrote it using music notation, and they wrote it using tab. Okay? It's the same melody, just written in 2 different ways. So I want you to try and see if you can read that top melody. They did, in the book, give you some kind of rhythm suggestions here, where you can kind of tell that these are supposed to be eighth notes and these are supposed to be half notes, which is really helpful. In general, you don't find that very often, but for this first exercise, I think that it will help you as you get started. Okay? After you learn to play this and you play it for me, there's another lesson that you will watch, and then you'll start to jump into playing some songs using tab. Have fun.